Hello, hello. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm so thankful that you're able to join us today, and we have some amazing content to bring for you. And so we're just going to jump right into this amazing panel of people, medical professionals that we have joining us today. My name is Nicole, and I'm the president of the National Inspirational Youth Convention. And again, I would like to welcome you to this webinar to talk about COVID-19 as well as the vaccine. So to start off, I would like to have our panel introduce themselves. I'm going to start off with Ms. Cruz.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Evelyn Cruz. I was born in Puerto Rico, raised here in New York. I love my ethnic background, my culture. I love it, passing it on to my children, of course. I have been a nurse at Acacia Network going on 21 years. It's a tremendous place to work with our community. I really enjoy what I do. I also have the privilege of serving as an associate pastor at Harvest Communities Church in the Bronx, which we also really, like, practically every day extend to the community. So here in the Bronx, we really have an opportunity to serve, as well as everywhere. But it has been something amazing through this pandemic to just see the needs and be able to meet them. So thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to Dr. Louissaint.
Good evening, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Great to be with my NIYC family. My name is Nicolette Louissaint, originally Caribbean American from Brooklyn. Grew up in Refuge Church of God, part of the NIYC family. I am a biomedical scientist, trained in chemical engineering, biological sciences. My terminal degree is a PhD in clinical pharmacology with a specialty in infectious diseases. For the last 12 years or so, my specialty has been emerging infectious diseases and disaster response. So I have led public health responses at the community, local, national, and international levels for things like H1N1, Zika, Ebola, and now COVID-19. Great to be with you.
Great. Good evening, all. I'm Dr. David Collier. I'm also a new. Can you hear me? Okay. I wasn't sure if I went off or not. All right. So I'm Dr. David Collier, New York native, born to two parents that immigrated to New York from Barbados. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President of Clinical Affairs of the Acacia Network, the wonderful organization that my colleague, Ms. Evelyn Cruz, works for. And I have the awesome opportunity also to be co-laborers in the gospel. I am serve as the executive pastor of the United Community Church of God in Laurelton, Queens. That's a little bit about me. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to speaking and learning from my fellow panelists.
Wonderful, wonderful. Before we go into some of the questions that have already come in, I would love for us just to talk a little bit about this experience, this season. We've already been going through this pandemic for over a year now. And so I would love to hear just a little bit about the different experiences you all have had, as well as like being on the ground working. So I'll start with you, Dr. Louissaint, if you can speak a little bit about what you've been doing throughout this pandemic.
Sure. So the organization that I run, Healthcare Ready, is a 15-year-old national nonprofit organization focused on maintaining coordination of healthcare supply chain and supply flows. I don't think there's ever been more discussion about the health supply chain than in the last year. So our focus is making sure that we are working with federal, state, and local government partners and healthcare partners to make sure that we are enhancing the flow of products across the nation. So our role has actually changed quite a bit over the last, I'd say, 15, 16 months. It really started with a focus on making sure that we could identify where personal protective equipment and routine chronic care medicines were globally, and increase the flow of those products to what we were calling COVID-19 hotspots in the United States, New York City being one of them for a number of months. So doing things like making sure that instead of products moving by ship, we could figure out strategies to move them by air to get them here 6 weeks faster, working with partners to set up procurement strategies to be able to not just get products to hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies, but also to community groups and local governments who had the ability to then get them to essential workers and others in the community, transportation workers and other parts of what we call critical infrastructure. Setting up partnerships with corporate partners to be able to increase the production of hand sanitizer and other supplies, working to make sure that chronic care medicines that needed to be available in larger amounts before the lockdown were available at pharmacies, and then communicating that information out to providers and to clinical partners so that they could make sure that their patients knew where to go to get their medicines. Now we're focused on equitable vaccine distribution, making sure that not just the vaccines against COVID-19, but also the available therapeutics, the monoclonal antibody treatments that can assist with those who have been infected with COVID-19 are available at infusion centers and other priority care facilities. So that's what we've been up to.
Wow, sounds like you've been busy.
Yeah.
I'll turn to you now, Ms. Cruz, if you can speak a little bit more about what you've been doing on the ground.
Sure. Through this pandemic, it has been extremely challenging. I've gotten familiar with the term, what they call boots on the ground, ensuring that our staff is well, ensuring the wellness of learning, ensuring that we have, I'm so happy for Dr. Nicolette, because, we depend a lot on those supplies and ensuring that the delivery and the usage of those supplies. And as well as throughout this time, you also get the definitive reality that this is a career that you chose. And you actually, you get that realization, wow, this is something that I'm grateful that I'm doing, throughout everything, even despite, what we've gone through, I'm grateful that we can do this. And one of the things that we worked at, like I saw you work with Dr. Collymore, is ensuring that we had what we needed, and also that education was vital in this. And as well, what we loved is the morale had to be kept up. The morale had to be kept up because we had to be that face for our community through this. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Collymore.
Wow. So I mean, there's so much of that I could say and probably speak for a couple of hours on what we've been through in the past year. But you know, our journey, my journey with COVID-19 began, I would say, in January of 2020. We have a multifaceted organization, and one of the components of the CASI network is a skilled nursing facility, a nursing home in the Bronx. So I remember the medical director of the nursing home calling me in mid-January saying that there's this virus overseas. You know, we need to try to make sure that we're ready just in case it makes its way over to New York. So he said, you know, we should buy some additional N95 masks. And I said, sure, why not, right? You know, I just want to keep my providers happy so that they care for the patients. You know, why not invest? You know, it was a few $1,000s. It wasn't a large amount of money. And that was probably one of the single greatest things that we could have done. You know, I'm grateful to say that we've never had a shortage of PPE in our organization, and that, you know, is from the team effort that started from the beginning. Then in March of 2020, you know, we went into, you know, lockdown mode in New York City, and the first and foremost thing that we wanted to do, in addition to care and continue to care for the patients and the individuals that we serve, is to make sure that our staff was safe. So one of the things that we had to look at was, you know, who was the most fragile of our staff members, because now it's time for those that are strongest to jump to the front line and to really do battle with COVID-19. In the midst of that, I was also symptomatically ill with COVID in mid-March of last year, and that was a scary time. So I'm sitting in bed, and I'm short of breath, and I'm coughing, and having fever, and I'm watching CNN probably more than I should have, because that was not particularly reassuring. But I thank God that through that, you know, through that experience, you know, you really get deep into the Word when you are physically compromised. You know, I thank God for that, and thank God for, you know, bringing me back fully through that. And since then, you know, we've been making sure that our health centers are serving the communities that we serve, providing healthcare, providing testing. We provide testing services throughout the city of New York. And now that we're at a stage where vaccine rollout is probably the single greatest thing that we can do to help combat this pandemic, we're ensuring that we have access and availability to vaccine in the communities that we serve. So that includes daily communication with the Department of Health, you know, doing forums such as this, and also just making sure that the message gets out there that the communities that were most severely affected by COVID-19 need to be those that are prioritized when it comes to equitable vaccination. That, in addition to, you know, working within the church, making sure that that Zoom is a platform that we're using, making sure that we get the word out there also, in addition to the word of God, in addition to the word of healthcare.
Wow, thank you so much, all of you, for all the work that you're doing on the front lines. So we had a slew of questions, and I definitely want to honor everyone who's taken time to write these questions. And so I definitely want us to try to address them. So first question, and I'll turn to you, Dr. Louissaint, for this one. The vaccines seem like it happened faster than I've seen any other vaccine be created. So is that something we should be concerned with?
I would say no, and here's why. So there are a few things to put into consideration here. One is that the technology for actually all three of the approved vaccines right now, the mRNA vaccines, as well as the adenovirus vaccine, which is the Johnson & Johnson product, are more than 20 years old. So the technology has been well established. The other thing to remember is that there are outbreaks that happen that we are fortunate in being spared from. So there was an outbreak a few years ago, about 6 years ago, the MERS-CoV outbreak. And that was the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus outbreak. That, I would say, is a cousin to the strain that we're dealing with right now. And a lot of the science that went into the mRNA vaccines that we're using today was actually informed by the science in the vaccine development that was invested in for MERS-CoV. But another thing to remember is that as somebody in disasters, there is something called a pandemic preparedness plan for the nation. So even though we don't talk about it often, as a part of our national security strategy, we do have a pandemic preparedness plan. And a part of that is what we call medical countermeasures, or medicines, therapies, treatments that would be used in a disaster, and figuring out how we would accelerate the research and development of those products and how we would test for safety and efficacy. So the paramount standard is always first looking for safety and then efficacy. And that is not skirted in any way in the pandemic preparedness and response plans. But all of this relies on frameworks that are many years old and technologies that have been well established for decades.
Thank you so much for that answer. Ms. Cruz, can you explain some of the side effects of this vaccine?
Well, one of the side effects that we have really seen is this arm soreness, of course, the next day. We like to always incorporate a little humor. We tell them, your muscles do not like to be invaded. So expect that. We also let them know, well, if you haven't gone to the gym for a while, this is what it's going to feel like. So it kind of eases it up. There can be chills. There could be headaches, fatigue. And this is what to expect as a side effect. Anything we're prepared, absolutely. If there's any person that may experience an allergic reaction, we're prepared for that. We observe them for 15 minutes. If anyone has comorbidities, then we observe them for 30 minutes. But we're sure that we assure our patients, we give them their fact sheets, everything they can expect, and to stay as long as they want. But the major symptoms, side effects have been, not symptoms, side effects.
Wow, thank you so much. There was a question also, or a statement that came out that said that this person already had contracted COVID before, and they have the antibodies. So now they're just thinking that they're just going to ride that wave since they don't know exactly how long the antibodies will last and whatnot. Dr. Collymore, are you able to speak a little bit to that?
Sure, I can speak to that on a very personal note. so as one that did test positive for COVID-19 and had antibodies and presumably at a relatively high level due to symptomatic infection. The reality is that it's not known how long antibodies that are developed through sort of natural infection last, and the antibodies that are developed through active immunization last longer. So although we don't know the duration of time of either, ultimately it's only time will tell. I believe the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson have said that they can confidently say that at least 1 year of protection they can speak to. We do know that it's very unpredictable how long antibodies last from natural infection. And we also know that the level of antibody protection is less than that developed through active immunization. So that's why, as I thought about it in November, December of last year, about my own personal decision about whether or not I would get vaccinated, being that I had seemingly been infected and hopefully protected, I thought about the experience that I went through in March of last year. And I thought about the night sitting in isolation in a room, wondering what would happen to me and if my family would be compromised, and how they would be compromised if there was anything that were to happen to me. And the thought that I had in my mind is I do not want to, or I want to do everything that I can do so that I do not have to go through that experience again. And that is the reason why it motivated me to say, although I had been actively infected and had antibodies, that being vaccinated was one of the first things that when it was available and when we were distributing it, I wanted to make sure that I was vaccinated.
Wow, thank you. I'll stay with you, Dr. Collymore, for this one. And another question that came through said, if the vaccine does not protect you from getting COVID, why bother get it at all?
Right. Well, I've been telling, folks within our organization and anyone I can tell that the measure of success of the vaccine is not prevention of infection. And infection by defined as a positive test. The measure of success, the efficacy that is being cited, is in preventing severe infection and death. So the measure of success that we're looking for is a reduction in hospitalizations, a reduction in the mortality rate, and ultimately the case rate will decline. But that is not really the measure of success that we're looking for, particularly in the short term. Those that were involved in the clinical trials, there were no deaths from COVID-19 from those individuals in the clinical trials, and that is the hope and the expectation from those of us that are vaccinated also. So transmission may continue. We have seen even on an anecdotal basis, we've administered thousands of vaccines already, and even in some of our congregate care settings where we've had what we would define as outbreaks of COVID-19, those that have been immunized have fared better in terms of less transmission in that population. So again, I caution folks to not think of that as the measure of success, but the measure of success is really, have we prevented hospitalizations? Have we prevented the overwhelming mortality that we faced over the course of the last year? We're nearing 600,000 lives lost to COVID-19, and that probably is an underestimation, because early on we did not really know what we were dealing with. So when you think about that, it should be motivating to do all that we can do to protect each other as we move forward.
Thank you. You mentioned something saying that, of course, because the vaccine is to prevent the severe effects of COVID-19. A question came in. It says, on the CDC VAERS site, it shows thousands have died already from the vaccine. How can the vaccine be safe if this is the case? Dr. Louissaint, can you speak to that?
So I think the site that's being referenced here is the vaccine adverse reaction tracker that the CDC is obligated to maintain for any vaccine that is administered. There have been no deaths from the administration of the vaccine to date globally. So I'm quite confident that the CDC VAERS site is not indicating that there are deaths. Now, there may be what's called an adverse event, which is what that system is designed to track. An adverse event can be anything from, wow, I have a rash at my injection site. I had a fever, which is actually an indication that your immune system is mounting a response, or something like I had an allergic reaction because I had an allergy to sorbitol, which is one of the sugars that's in the vaccine. But there are no deaths that are caused and linked to the vaccine administration in the US to date, nor for the other vaccines that have been administered globally, and which is honestly a blessing and a testament to science and technology being used as a tool to be able to help people and actually impact public health.
Yeah, and I caution folks that would draw that conclusion that the folks that have been immunized may pass away from other causes, a week or 2 weeks or a month afterwards. It doesn't make you immune to death, but it does prevent death from COVID-19 in those that are vaccinated. So I think a lot of there's a lot of information and misinformation on the internet. I think a lot of folks are drawing conclusion if somebody passes away 2 weeks after they got the vaccine, it must be related to having received the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you. One of the other questions came in that says, I'm a person of faith. Isn't getting the vaccine showing that I don't have faith in God? Ms. Cruz, are you able to speak to that?
Sure. I think that's a very, very valid question, However, if as a person of faith, and God is the creator of all things, right? We have a God that is innovative. We have a God that gives us gifts. So God does. He does allow us. He gives us the ability for people like Dr. Collymore, Dr. Nicolette to be able to be in these areas, to learn this. And it doesn't mean that I have a little bit, it doesn't mean that my faith is small. It just means that I trust God with anything that comes my way. But if God created these medical people, and God created, we look at us here today, we serve in the medical field and we serve God. It doesn't in no means does it diminish God's value. Anything, it enhances our faith to trust God through any process that we face, that we are able to face in life. So no, our faith has to be, well, I'm going to give you a quick example. Before I took the vaccine, I prayed because I believe that that's, my faith. I prayed and I said, okay, God, I believe that you're in this and I'm going to trust you and I'm going to take this vaccine in your name. And that's how the word tells us, work as if unto the Lord. So by no means does that mean that you're not walking in faith. We each have our intimate relationship with God. And I believe that our faith should not ever be tested ourselves in that manner. Whatever we feel, whatever we should do, that is in aligns with the word of God.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen.
So may I ask, has everyone taken the vaccine?
I have.
It's one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All
Now,
right.
I will say, and I blame Miss Evelyn Cruz for this. I was supposed to be the first person in our organization to receive the vaccine, and I'm going to talk about this for years to come. But I think she let like 4 or 5 people go ahead of me because I was in a meeting. But I absolutely received both doses of the Moderna vaccine already.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
I forgive you. I forgive you.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. So sticking in the faith topic, a question came in, and I will try to pronounce it correctly. It said, explain HEC293 cells and luciferase. It said, so there's a 2 parts. So it said, explain HEC293 cells and luciferase, and why are aborted fetuses in the vaccine? Dr. Louissaint, are you able to speak to that?
I am, but I'm going to need to parse that question in order to do it any justice. So I'm going to start by saying I will explain what HEC293 cells are, and I will explain what luciferase is, but I'll take the easy part first. Aborted fetuses are not in the vaccine. So there are tools that we use in biomedical science to be able to develop things, what's called in vitro. You'll hear that it basically means that things can be done at the bench, outside of in a test tube, in a flask. And what that basically means is that in order to do tests on things or develop products that require some form of living ATP, other supplies, you're going to need a cell to be able to do that. There are many different cell lines that are derived from all sorts of things, mice tissue, skin tissue, all sorts of things. That HEC293 is a cell line, much like any other cell line. They are commonly used in biomedical research because you will need a cell line to be able to conduct the actual research that you're looking to do. Luciferase is what is. So I've actually received this question before, and I've received it because of the beginning of the term. But luciferase is actually a tool that can be used inside of cells to light them up. So Lucifer in the Latin actually refers to light. And so there are many terms in science that actually use that clause in reference to chemicals or enzymes that have the ability to, upon certain actions, create an effect that allows you to use light. And the reason that matters is because when you're trying to visualize something inside of a cell, you think about your hand, right? You think about my finger, there are millions of cells on my finger. So just thinking about the size of that. If you're looking to light something up so that you can see it in a microscope, you need to be able to visualize it with that light. And so that's what luciferase does. And it is not in the vaccine.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake, and this may, I don't want this to sound like
No,
I am being flippant. So luciferase has nothing to do with Lucifer in the Bible.
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where words get tricky, because it means as Christians, as believers, and as people who frankly study the word, it means something to us. And as people who study Latin and are using terms from Latin, which actually a lot of scientific terms are derived from, it means something that's totally divorced from what it may mean, how we are using it in our common everyday language. But really it pertains to the Latin use of the word, which really is relating to light and the fact that this chemical is able to allow us to visualize cells. It has nothing to do with Lucifer in the Bible.
Okay. Thank you so much for that explanation. Dr. Collymore, I have a question. It says, we don't know long-term effects of the vaccine, but infants and adults are being vaccinated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you were breaking up a little bit there, but I think I got the gist of the question. And the reality is, I mean, I think as Dr. Nicolette had stated before, the science and the platform of the vaccine has been available in research for decades. We've also been administering many vaccines for a longer period of time than that. So we have experience with the field of immunizing and vaccinating individuals. We have experience with the study of the platform that was used to develop this vaccine. So although we don't know, because the first person that received the COVID-19 vaccine has not been alive for 10 years. So we can't say that we have an individual that received this vaccine 10 years ago and look at them now. But we are familiar with the platform, we're familiar with the practice, and the studies that have been performed have demonstrated that the vaccine is safe. We also have to understand what we've been through over the course of the past year, and the horrific time period that we have lived through, the level of death that we have experienced and are experiencing. This pandemic is not over. It is not a thing of the past. It's not a historical footnote. We have to understand that if we do not act with all of the tools that God has provided us with, that we may be facing 1 million deaths in this nation. So when the opportunity to have a vaccine comes along, everything in life, of course, is always risks and benefits. So you look at the potential risk, and we see that it's minute because we understand the science of developing these vaccines. We understand the platform and the practice of vaccination. So the risk is very little from our standpoint, but the benefit of receiving the vaccine is very great. So if this can lead to a reduction in the number of lives that have been lost, that will be success. And we can be confident and comfortable with the safety because of our experience and because of the studies of this vaccine.
And I would just add one point of fact in addition to everything that Dr. Collymore said. Infants are not being vaccinated at this time. So the authorization for the vaccine is for one of the vaccines, it's for 16 and up. But otherwise, it's adults that are being vaccinated because those are the populations that where the vaccine was actually tested in clinical trials. There are trials going on now to look at children, but infants are not being vaccinated at this time.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. Staying in the adolescent age group, a question came about. It said, if I'm pregnant or breastfeeding, should I get the vaccine? Nurse Cruz, would you be able to answer that?
Well, there have been, there's nothing stating that you cannot get the vaccine if you're nursing or pregnant. There's nothing proven that you shouldn't. We have had women that are pregnant come get vaccinated, and we have not seen anything, or have there not been any studies that would suggest that you shouldn't. Matter of fact, it has been better. There's been a lot of reports. I have a good friend that works in OBGYN saying that when a lot of women are coming in and they don't know they're positive till they get there for delivery. So definitely it's not, there's nothing proving not to be. It has been proven safe.
Thank you. Dr. Collymore, I'm going to ask you a question. The question, it says, I heard the vaccine will alter your DNA. Is this true?
Short answer is simple, no. It does not. It does not alter DNA in your body. It causes your body to develop an immune response, but it does not change the chemical makeup of your DNA. The messenger RNA is simply that. It's delivering a message to your body to develop a response of immunity to fight COVID-19. But it does not in any way alter your DNA makeup.
Thank you. Dr. Louissaint, are you able to expound a little bit more? Messenger RNA, I've heard that term, or mRNA. Can you explain, like what Dr. Collymore was saying, can you explain that a little bit more? Because that's another one of the questions.
Sure. So we're all familiar with DNA. We talk about DNA often. We talk about it as your genetic code, the sequence that makes you you. The reality is that that sequence is the beginning of the step, and that there are intermediaries along the way. And one of those intermediaries is RNA. So ribonucleic acid is an intermediary that in the body, in mammals, codes for a protein. So that is what messenger RNA is. As Dr. Collymore said, it literally carries the message that encodes for a protein. But because we know how to make messenger RNA, and we know the ways in which we're able to actually send codes to a cell to enable it to make a protein, we're able to use messenger RNA as that technology to, instead of actually giving your body the virus or protein from the virus, we can say, hey, this is the what's called the spike protein, the protein that's on the surface of the COVID virus. And we're going to give you the message to code not the virus, but just that protein on the surface. And so the next time your body sees that protein on the surface, it's able to say, hey, I've seen this before. And the last time I saw it, my immune system was able to kill it. And so now that I've seen it again, now I'm able to have that message inside of my system that says, this is what it is, and this is how I kill it.
A question came through that said, or asked if this was the first time we ever used mRNA in a vaccine. And they said, if that is the case, why are we using it? Dr. Collymore, can you answer that one?
I'll start off, but I know Dr. Louissaint is probably the expert in this field. But I'll start it off by saying that the platform for the technology that created this vaccine has been in existence for decades. And I think, as Dr. Louissaint said earlier, it's been used in other global outbreaks, and has proven to be effective and to be safe. So therefore, when the need to develop a vaccine for COVID-19 arose, that was one of the platforms that was studied and that was proven to be safe and proven to be effective in developing the vaccine. So it's new to most of us that are sort of novices to the field of biomedical research. I myself have had to read about it and study it also. So it may be new to most, but it is not a novel technique or way to manufacture a vaccine. So the efficacy is there, the safety has been proven, and folks that are concerned about sort of the timeline of development of the vaccine also need to understand that we were in a period of time, and we are in a period of time where urgent action is necessary. We don't want to wait for another 500,000 or another 1,000,000 lives to be lost while we are waiting when we have something that has been proven to be effective and proven to be safe. Time is of the essence. And when you're in an emergency situation, you need to look at, of course, the safety and look at what has been proven to be effective, but you need to act with a sense of urgency. We do not have 5 to 10 years of waiting to see what the study population looks like as we watch millions of people pass away. We don't have that time.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything they want to add to that?
I'll just add that mRNA, actually the technology has moved further along in cancer treatment technologies and not just infectious diseases. So again, everything Dr. Collymore said, but understanding that one of the reasons that this was such a pivotal decision right now is because of the safety associated with mRNA vaccines. Knowing that with that technology, you actually are never exposing the patient to the virus. And with so many older vaccines, and actually, if you look at the history of everything from the 1918 pandemic influenza, the Spanish flu, all the way through many different outbreaks, oftentimes the first vaccine that we start with is what's called either a live attenuated virus or an attenuated virus. And what that means is that it's still active, but you've taken out a portion of that virus to make it non-infectious or significantly less infectious. And the danger with that, with something that's an emerging virus that we're still learning about, is that you don't know if you've been able to remove all of the parts of the virus that may be infectious, which is why the mRNA technology is so important, because there's no exposure to the virus itself. And so when you're dealing with a novel strain like we are right now in the middle of a pandemic that's affected the world in every corner of the world, it's important to think about that as an aspect of safety as well, because that actually moving in that direction actually made sure that we were administering vaccines that would pose no additional unknown safety risk because we were not exposing people to live attenuated virus.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Here's a question that came in the chat. It says, what if you have severe allergies? Can you take the vaccine? Anyone who wants, they can answer this one.
All right, I'll jump on that. So the answer is yes. And the answer in our own personal experience, we have administered vaccine to individuals that have had a history of severe allergies. The recommendation is that we do monitor them for a longer period of time. So any individual that comes in to receive the vaccine is monitored for 15 minutes post-vaccine. And to be honest, much of that time is actually spent with patient education. So we're connecting them to the electronic platform so that they can download the app on their phone, so that they can check in and monitor any symptoms or any adverse outcomes. We're giving them the fact sheets that have been produced by the manufacturer. There's a lot of conversation that takes place after the vaccine is administered. So most of that 15 minutes is not even medical per se. And for those that have a history of severe allergy or that have even a history of significant chronic illnesses, we are monitoring those individuals for a total of 30 minutes. And like I said, we've given thousands of vaccine. We have not had any of them have a severe allergic reaction to any of the vaccines.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think is so amazing about the vaccines right now is that they're simple. Part of the technology that's so beautiful is that they're really simple. And so if you actually look at the ingredients that are in them, oftentimes people who have severe allergies are reacting to something that's actually in the vaccine or the vehicle that the vaccine is made in. So my own mother has severe allergies and has a severe allergy to chicken. Actually. And with that, it's actually very difficult for her to take the flu vaccine. She can only take the cell-based vaccines because most flu vaccines are made in eggs. But she's been able to take the COVID-19 vaccine and has tolerated it quite well. So I just always like to remind people personally, I have a personal stake in this. There's no people that I would protect more than my own parents. And if I've been comfortable with my parents taking the vaccine, knowing that my mom has those severe allergies and has tolerated it well, I recommend that everyone that is able to get the vaccine.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. We have another question. Is there anything to do to prep before taking the vaccine? Ms. Cruz?
Yeah, there's really nothing to do, to prep before taking the vaccine. We have nothing at all. No studies showing that, no evidence of having to prep for it. We do exactly as Dr. Collymore stated before. We do a lot of patient education. We basically make sure that they understand, what side effects there can be. We try to alleviate, the level of anxiety because there's so many new things. We spend practically a lot of time talking about what's an mRNA, talking a lot of time about the allergies, how they may feel. And we have seen that even the next day, every individual has a different response, within those side effects that we have spoken about. But as far as prepping before, there is nothing significant that you must do. Just make an appointment.
And I would just add, do not deviate from your normal daily routine.
Correct.
We had a staff member actually that got the vaccine, and I think she got it maybe about 2 p.m. that day. And then she sat at the table and she said she felt a little lightheaded. She said she did not want to eat before receiving the vaccine, and that is not her normal daily routine. So she skipped breakfast and lunch, and then took the vaccine, and then said she felt a little lightheaded. And I said, maybe you should eat lunch. She ate lunch, and she felt better. So that's my recommendation to everyone. Do not deviate from your normal daily routine before taking the vaccine.
Absolutely.
And eat breakfast and lunch.
Yes.
Thank you. This question just has come from someone who is extremely amazing. As medical professionals, what, if any, reservations do you have about this vaccine?
She is amazing. I think Mike is a little biased because that's his wife. But I will second his amazingness. I would say, with anything, I tell everyone to be informed, right? So make sure you read, make sure you ask the questions before you go in to take the vaccine. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Find a trusted person that you can speak to that will guide you to correct information. And that's what I did, last year before we rolled it out. I said I'm leading an organization, and I want to be able to make sure that my organization provides access to vaccine for the communities that are underserved chronically historically. So because of that, I need to be aware of what I'm going to propose to give to the community that I serve. So I did a lot of the reading, I did a lot of the studying, I did a lot of that legwork, and that gave me the confidence and the comfort to say, not only is this something that I want to do for myself, but this is something that I'm going to encourage every person that is eligible to receive the vaccine to proceed and to do. So I think any reservations can be overcome with a healthy dialogue such as this, and with just doing a proper research to answer any questions. So at this point, I do not have any reservations about the vaccine, no more than I would about any other vaccine.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. So I have another question. This one is relatively lengthy, so bear with me.
Mhm.
If an individual has never had any issue with their heart, and coincidentally, a few days after taking the first dose of the vaccine, they went for a regular checkup, and it was found that their heart rate was irregular. Shortly thereafter, they received a pacemaker. If the only thing that the individual has done most recently that was not routine was receive the vaccine, how can one not be concerned that there may be a link between those two events? Who wants
Wow,
to
that's
tackle that one?
in the I guess I'll
It's the-
attempt to tackle it. I mean, I never dismiss the concerns of any individual. But I do encourage folks to make sure that they are looking at all of the facts within the situation. So, I mean, for an individual such as this, I would say, well, when was their most recent cardiology evaluation prior to receiving the vaccine? It may very well be that there was an irregular heart rate that pre-existed before they received the vaccine. Now, if you tell me that, and even if you tell me that you had seen the cardiologist even a day or two prior, the only I would be convinced that there was a causal relationship if you told me that the person wore a Holter monitor for a week prior to receiving the vaccine and there were no irregularities seen, and then they got the vaccine, and then 2 days later there's an issue. I can't say that there is a causal relationship based upon the studies and the research. If this was a recurring theme, if the study population had demonstrated that there were folks that had irregular heartbeats post-vaccination, then I might be concerned. But in this particular situation, I would say that I would need to examine more facts. Again, not to dismiss the individual's concern, because any concern with your health, your health as an individual, is a legitimate concern. I never dismiss anyone's concerns that they have, but we need to look at the entire picture, all of the facts, for us to fully understand, if at all, there is any relationship between the two.
Thank you so much, and I thank you also for saying about not dismissing. I guess one thing I think we've seen is that there are many people, if you don't have or if you don't ascribe to the same belief as it pertains to the vaccine, there's like two different sects. But I think this is real for everyone. So I'm happy for this space that we can just have a conversation, present the facts, and so that the individuals can make informed decisions about their health. Because the reality is, if they're not taking it or if they're not encouraging their parents to, I'm sure that they love their parents just like, just the same as somebody who is telling their parent to get the vaccine. And so I really appreciate this. This time that we can just have this kind of conversation.
Yeah. And just a quick one along those lines. I was in a meeting, a Zoom meeting. I think it was in mid-January, and it was a number of healthcare leaders throughout the state. Many of them not looking like me or you, so there weren't many Black or brown people on that call. And I remember one gentleman saying he could not believe that his staff were not lining up to take the vaccine. And his staff was primarily, it was an organization that served a largely minority community. Most of his staff was minority. He couldn't believe it. He was shocked and appalled. And I said, well, the first thing that we have to do when we're talking about, this term of vaccine hesitancy has been used a lot over the last few weeks. The first thing we have to do is to have a dialogue and to acknowledge that there is good reason for some to be concerned that historically the United States public health system has been a detriment in certain instances, not in every instance, but in several well-documented historical instances. We have not acted as a medical industry in the best interest of people of color. We have to acknowledge that as fact. We have to acknowledge it as truth. Once you acknowledge that, then you can move on to have the conversation about what we have been through over the course of this last year, and the level of death that we have experienced, and the level of trauma that we have experienced, and how horrific it's been. And then we have to look at, well, what tools do we currently have to combat that and to reverse that? And we look at the fact that we do have monoclonal antibodies, we do have remdesivir, we do have some modalities that can be used for those that are significantly ill. But in terms of a preventive measure, the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccines that we currently have are the single most influential, important tool that we have at this time to prevent severe infection and death. And once you have that complete conversation, then you can, and you have that dialogue, then you can convince somebody that has said that they are hesitant because of historical reasons. But if you dismiss their concerns and say you should not feel that way, you've already lost that person's attention and you will not make any progress. So we have to have dialogue, we have to listen, we have to talk. But ultimately, we have to do what is in the best interest of our families, of our communities, of our churches. Many churches have not had the opportunity to have full in-person worship. And I myself as a leader within my church do not want to be the reason why someone that comes back into the church becomes ill because I did not prepare them, equip them, and protect them. So if we care about our communities, our families, our churches, we have to be an advocate for what is best for the individuals that we serve.
Thank you. Another question that just came in, it says, when dealing with an inflammatory disease, IBD, requiring prednisone from time to time is prednisone. I cannot see, I don't have my glasses. From time to time, is it safe to take the vaccine?
Absolutely.
Dr. Louissaint, are you able to touch on that?
Sure, it's that, yes. So everything Dr. Collymore explained about the safety of the vaccine still upholds. Definitely understand people specifically with inflammatory or autoimmune conditions having specific concerns, but absolutely it is safe.
Yeah.
Thank
and again,
you.
just speaking to our experience, we've administered vaccine to folks that are actively undergoing chemotherapy, folks that have a number of autoimmune diseases, inflammatory diseases. We have not had any issue administering vaccine to that population.
That is
I
correct.
do encourage those individuals to go to their specialists and have that conversation with them also. But we have not had anyone, any specialists say, no, you should not. And we have been actively advising folks that have symptoms.
Yeah, it has been the opposite. They come in for the vaccine stating, my specialist said I should come. And it should come as soon as possible. So we do have that experience. It's better for them.
Absolutely.
And if I could just take a moment, I think one of the things that we should talk about later is the importance of actually understanding clinical trials and participating in clinical trials, especially for Black people, because it is so important to understand that when we are in the process of developing potential drugs, vaccines, that's when we're able to have that patient population that's getting very intensive care, very intensive monitoring. And that's where we understand how the product will perform. And so the reason we're able to say this is based off of experience, but it's also backed by data. These clinical trials that were conducted for all of these products actually looked at about 14,000 people in one of the final phases, but there were about 12% Black people, about 9% Hispanic and Latinx individuals, and many people who had chronic conditions, comorbid conditions, and specifically autoimmune conditions. So the reason that we are able to provide this information is because there were individuals that looked like us that were willing to actually participate in the trials, knowing that they also had those conditions. And because they were willing to participate, and because we were able to get that data in that safe, controlled environment, we can now have confidence as it's going out into a broader population. And for us, that's the goal. We want to make sure that we know as much about these products when they're in development, when they're being reviewed, when they're being authorized, and so that by the time we are rolling it out in a large scale vaccination campaign, we're confident that it's safe. And so I just want to, really lift that up and say, this is part of the reason that when we're not in a pandemic, we talk about the reason that we want people to participate in clinical trials. And this is exactly why.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want us to keep to our time limit because trying to be a person of integrity. But we do have another question. I want to just touch on this one. It says, explain the difference between mRNA and DNA in the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or explain the difference between the two vaccines.
That's okay.
I'll defer to Dr. Louissaint to give you the technical.
How much time do I have to answer this question?
That's why
Okay, so all right, let's do this. All right, this is when I wish I had a whiteboard behind me and I could just start drawing things. But the one-shot Johnson & Johnson uses a what's a vector. It uses an adenovirus, and it sends a message in that way. It sends a portion of the viral DNA encapsulated in that adenovirus, and that is what mounts the immune response. The adenovirus technology is maybe 40 years old now. And yeah, it's almost about as old as I am, and is designed to be able to carry the message. So that's what the adenovirus does. It's a shell that gets it to the immune system. It similarly does the work of making sure that the immune system can see that virus, that piece of the virus, and begin to mount an immune response. The mRNA viruses, as we talked, vaccines, as we talked about, are carrying a message that are going to the immune system to say, here is the message to encode the protein. That protein is what's on the surface of the virus. I'm trying not to use technical terms, and so I'm pausing. So one of them is saying, if this is the virus and there's a protein on the surface, that protein on the surface is actually called, that spike protein, it looks like a spike, and it's actually what allows for the virus to enter cells. So what the mRNA vaccine does is it actually allows the immune system, it allows your cells to code for that protein that's on the surface, and then teaches your immune system to recognize that protein and kill it. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine takes a part of that DNA and says, here's the DNA that you need to recognize for the virus itself. And now here's what you need to recognize and kill whenever you see it. So they're two different technologies, but what they're doing is understanding parts of the actual virus and teaching your immune system to be able to recognize it and promptly kill it if they see it again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have another question that just came in, and there are some questions that have come in. They were already answered earlier in this session, and so I am going to skip over some, not out of disrespect or not because they're not important, but because it was already answered, and so we're just going to ask you just to, when this place on our website or on our YouTube channel, you can just go back and check it out. But there's another question that came in. For a person who has sickle cell and suffered crisis when they had COVID-19, should they get the vaccine, or should they just wait for Johnson & Johnson or take whatever vaccine is available? I guess that question has a few parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a couple of parts to that question. I would say, vaccines are recommended. Most vaccines are recommended in individuals that do have sickle cell disease. Some of them are even more important in that population than in the general population when you talk about pneumococcal disease. So there is no contraindication to receiving either of the vaccines, whether it's Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, or Pfizer in this population. And I would say, as someone that in this question, it stated that they suffered a crisis when they had COVID-19. I would absolutely encourage them to be vaccinated. Sickle cell is a disorder that does compromise your immune system at baseline. So again, you want to equip yourself, your body, to be as strong as possible, to be able to mount as strong a response as possible if they were to face COVID-19 again. So absolutely, I would encourage this person and every individual with sickle cell disease to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, whichever one is available to them.
Right. Thank you so much. I know that there are more questions that will be coming in. We will, for anyone who would like to get more information about this and whatnot, please, you can email info@niyc.org. Again, you can email info@niyc.org. We will be sure to get everyone on this panel any of the questions that are coming in, and we will definitely reach back out, give you the answers that you're looking for. But from the bottom of my heart, please, I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you for giving up your time, but also thank you for your service, how you have tirelessly been working behind the scenes and many times without a thank you to help people like us who are sometimes unable to even help ourselves in this particular situation. And so I would just like to thank you. Thank you for everyone who's viewed this time. Again, please continue to look on our website for updates concerning everything NIYC. Continue to follow us on social media. But above everything, we pray that you are all safe. We pray that you are thinking of your fellow man or your fellow woman, and also just being a help to whoever you may see in need. We love you. We thank you. Again, thank you to our panelists, and we will be sure to speak with you all soon. Have a wonderful night, and God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.